Thank you all for being here. Thank you for that introduction. You know, for a Saturday morning, come and talk about health stuff, you got to be pretty dedicated. I was asking Pastor Ed, you know, what percentage you think these folks come and know who I am or have listened or heard about, you know, what I teach? And he said, oh, these will be the A-B students in here. These are the motivated. But really, if you would, a show of hands, do y'all have a pretty good understanding of what we're doing and what we're talking about and teaching, or are you pretty brand new to this? If you're brand new, maybe raise your hand. Okay, so there's a few, and that's great, and that's awesome. I'm glad you're here. And I'll touch on that. What I was feeling like I needed to talk about today was the number one killer in America, heart disease. And this afternoon, I was thinking, and this could change. Y'all could give some input, but diabetes and autoimmune. I was in Abilene this past week giving a presentation. These businesses obviously have to pay for health insurance for their employees. And there's a company there in Abilene that kind of helps these businesses find the best health insurance for their employees. But the lady called and said, man, these businesses are spending so much money on sick care, really, but on health insurance. And there's 70 different companies represented. But she wants to actually help them try to save money, which means you got to get healthy. But she showed me the financials on these companies, on their health insurance stuff, and diabetes and autoimmune. Huge dollars they're spending. So I was thinking we might talk on that this afternoon, but we can talk about whatever y'all want. You know, for those of you who are more further down your road, your journey on true health, and are doing some things, you know, how I see it is y'all are the light out there. Y'all are the truth in your sphere of influence, your family, your community, your work. Y'all go teach this truth. But this heart disease, heart attacks, number one killer, and cholesterol. That's what everybody's thinking heart attacks are from. Cholesterol is number 45 out of 48 risk factors for heart attack. And the little bit of influence it has, it's because it's inflamed. We're going to talk about that. But for real quick, I'm going to do a real quick bio for those that are new and maybe haven't heard or don't know, because what I'm about to say is totally opposite of what your cardiologist will say, probably what your family practitioner will say, what the American Heart Association says, and pretty much every institution will say. So why do I talk different than everybody else? Because I didn't plan on doing that. I used to be under the influence of the spirit of man-pleasing. And I never wanted to rock the boat. I never wanted to stick out like a sore thumb or be different. I wanted to make everybody happy and stay in line and follow the rules. And then God got a hold of me, and I learned about my identity in Christ, and I don't need to keep any man happy. Now I need to love my neighbor and speak the truth in love, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. Don't want to be offensive. And I prescribe medicine. So Veritas Medical is our clinic. That started 13 years ago. 2 years ago, the Lord said, hey, you've been Veritas Medical for 10 years has been reactive, last resort. What I mean by that is these patients would come to us. We never advertised. We only had a website so I could put education on there to try to keep people out of my office. But we never advertised. We weren't looking for business. It found us, and typically the people that would find us, because we don't take insurance, you're going to pay hard-earned cash money. It was the really, really sick people. And they'd been everywhere, tried everything, desperate, basically dying. And they would decide, oh, like a Hail Mary pass, we'll try the alternative holistic guy. So that was 10 years, reactive, last resort. And the Lord said, you need to get proactive, first option. These people are suffering 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and going bankrupt. And it's a big obstacle for them to go be fully who God made them to be because they're so tired, brain fog, going to the doctor all the time, spending all their money on co-pays and all this. So get upstream. So anyways, that's where Veritas Wellness, a couple years ago, we decided to really get more aggressive with our education. And we have health coaches who do that, and it's all online, virtual. But real quick, so I just started out being a regular doctor, just a regular family practice, I wanted to do everything. My granddads were that way. They were in Belton, south of here, down closer, south of Waco. And back then it was a little smaller, and they were the two main doctors in town. And they'd been there for a long time. My mom's dad, 50 years practiced there, got the keys to the city on his 80th birthday when he retired. Had a heart attack that same day, too. A minor one, and he survived it. But I grew up in this little town watching these two guys take care of the whole town. Deliver babies, make house calls, do amputations if you need it. Surgeries, all the things. It was awesome. They were old school doctors, and I wanted to be like them. So that's what I did. Went to UT Houston Medical School. Dr. Shane Gillum, who's here in town, he and I were in the same class. And then went to residency in Waco Family Practice. Again, he and I were together there. Because Waco trained family practitioners to deliver babies and do surgeries and colonoscopies and kind of do it all. So after 3 years there, my wife and I, Jamie's family's from Turkey, Texas, up in the Panhandle. So we wanted to kind of get back towards West Texas, towards her family. So we looked around at lots of different small towns, and we'd walk into the little hospitals in these little towns, and I'd start talking to the nurse on call and ask if they needed another doctor. And they all said, yeah, we do. But Garza County didn't have a doctor at all. And the Lord said, go there, so we did. That's Post, Texas. And so we were in Post for 7 years and living my dream, doing the small town country doctor thing. And so it was great. Got to make house calls, got to take care of the little old ladies in the nursing home and the county jail inmates and the juvenile detention center kids in the juvie, and Friday night football game, team doctor, just all that stuff, and raising the kids in a small town. So I was just minding my business, doing my thing, living my dream. And part of it was also we were very successful financially, and that was the goal of the county clinic, because it was losing money every month, $5,000 to $10,000 a month. They were losing for years. The taxpayers were writing that check every month. And when I came, they said, we really need you to turn this around financially. And so I knew how to do that, because Waco Family Practice trained us on that. And you do it when Medicaid and Medicare are your primary payers, because they don't pay real good or very much reimbursement. It's volume. 7-minute visits, 45 patients a day. And procedures. That means do something with your hands. If you do something with your hands, Asher, you'll learn this. The guys who set the reimbursement rates were mostly surgeons, so they get paid more if you do something with your hands. So there's codes when you're charging insurance, Medicaid, Medicare. If you do a procedure, it's a procedure code. And literally picking earwax out, it's called cerumen impaction, removal of cerumen impaction. There's a code for that. And back then it paid like $125. But just talking to you about your diabetes paid about $75. So I learned to always be looking and asking. It's not illegal, but kind of double dipping, but legal. Do you have an ingrown toenail I can pull off? Is there a wart I need to look at and shave off? Is there a sebaceous cyst I can cut off? Is there you learn to do that. And so we were successful financially. Got them out of debt, and that was great. And not just me, great team, and a nurse, an office manager, it takes a team, and it was awesome. The community was behind us and supported us. It was all great. And we got so efficient, we were in the 95th percentile of all the clinics in America on the finances. And the Texas Monthly Magazine came and did a story about that. And then Washington Post from Washington, D.C., they came after that and followed me around for a week and put us on the front page. So I'm not trying to pump myself up with arrogantly here. If my wife were here, she'd be, shut up, get on to the point, get to the heart attacks. But I'm trying to set for the new folks, I'm trying to say I was living this dream world, small town country doctor making all this money. $1 million was in the healthcare district bank account because they weren't having to spend a dime because the clinic was self-sufficient. We were paying our own way. And then the Washington Post comes, and now we're famous, and so rich and famous, and they built a brand new clinic too. And that $1 million clinic was paid off in 1 year. And 1 year after they paid it off, another $1 million was sitting in the bank account because they just were taking in the tax money but not spending it. So that's the scenario. 7 years, living my dream, all this success, and then boom, it all changed when I met a doctor who told me there's no such thing as diseases. And if you're new to this, you're probably thinking that doctor's crazy, because that's what I thought. And I told him that. You're crazy. What do you mean there's no such thing as diseases? And my nurses would print off my schedule every day and tape it on top of the nurse's station desk so I could just mark off every patient when I saw them. And I grabbed that list, 45 patients, and I just went right, and most of them have more than one disease. And I just started running through them. Oh yeah, no such thing as diseases? What about ulcerative colitis? What about rheumatoid arthritis? What about diabetes and asthma and ADD and depression and fibromyalgia and lupus and all of them? And he said, nope, those are all consequences. And if you weren't born with it, you probably don't need to keep it. And then he said, why don't you go look up, go digging, be a good doctor and dig, be a detective and go find when was the first heart attack. Heart attacks are a new invention, he said. Go find the first heart attack you can find in America. In the American medical literature, the first heart attack ever reported and published was in 1912. There was one in the whole country. First one ever. The founder of Hopkins Medical School, considered the founder of modern medicine, Sir William Osler. They interviewed him. He practiced in the late 1800s to early 1900s. They asked him, how many heart attacks in your career? At Hopkins, 0. And now it's the number one killer. 600,000 to 700,000 Americans will die from heart disease every year. And you can go across the board pretty much with all these diseases. Cancer was so rare in the early 1900s, they published every single lung cancer case in the medical literature. Autism, first case ever, 1934 that I could find. Now it's 1 out of 36 kids. Diabetes in kids, type 2, unheard of. A pediatrician goes whole career, never would see a type 2 diabetic in a kid. You rarely would see a type 1. Now there's practices that are just full of them. I diagnosed a 7-year-old in Garza County with type 2 diabetes. So this just escalation of modern disease, really. But back to the story, that doctor said, you need to take that list home of all those diseases you saw today and do a Google search with each name, each disease name, but then put the word inflammation. Heart attack and inflammation. Stroke and inflammation. Parkinson's inflammation. Alzheimer's inflammation. Depression inflammation. Asthma inflammation. ADD inflammation. All of them. And you'll see a connection. And he was right. There was a big connection with inflammation. We're going to hone in this morning on heart attacks and inflammation and the little bit of benefit that a statin drug does. That's a cholesterol-lowering medication. It gives you a 0.8% reduction in future cardiovascular death. Less than 1% benefit. Spend trillions of dollars. It's the number one preventative thing that the American medical doctors have in their toolbox for you to try to help you. And it's less than 1% reduction of the thing you care about most, dying from heart attacks. I mean, if that's the best we can do, less than 1% for the number one killer, we're probably hunting down the wrong trail here. We probably need to take an exit off that road and go look somewhere else. And what I've learned, and what got hammered home to me this last month, I was treating measles in Gaines County, and what got hammered home to me was a lot of things. But doctors love being right more than they love their neighbor. And that's a harsh statement. But that got to be real big reality for me this past month. And maybe we'll talk about that later. But it's I can tell you in my own life. But we're bred that way. We're trained that way. We're told to be right from first grade on. You got to make all A's. And you got to be valedictorian. And you got to have the best GPA and the highest MCAT. And we got to be right. We got to give the right answer for the SAT, AC. And I get that. I mean, we need education. I'm not anti-education. But I'm just saying this thing about being right And then you get through med school, and you have to be right. Your life is on the line. But when you step back a minute and you take a big overview look of this thing, our protocols in this country equal the worst outcomes. We get the worst outcomes of any industrialized country. More of our babies die than any other country. Infant mortality rate higher in America than any other industrialized country. More of our moms die within 42 days of giving birth. Our maternal mortality rate sky high and climbing every year compared to other countries. Our overall life expectancy, we die younger than any other industrialized country by far and getting worse. More of our kids have chronic disease. It's up to 60% now. Chronic disease used to not be a thing in kids 50 years ago. Chronic medications weren't a thing 50 years ago. But what I'm saying is we're doing a lot of stuff. We go to the doctor the most, we spend the most money by far. You take the next, I think it's the next 10 combined other countries' healthcare expenditure, we're still combined. We spend more money than the next 10 countries. We're spending the most money, going to the doctor the most, taking the most meds to get the worst outcomes. And that just seems so unbelievable to people, but it is true, and it's been true for years. And I tell people out in Lubbock, that's like Texas Tech athletic department having the highest budget of any NCAA school in the country, the best facilities, the #1 recruiting class every year, and they come in dead last place in the Big 12 every single year. How long is that AD and the head coach going to last? But so doctors don't know this. They don't understand. Like what I'm about to tell you today, I almost guarantee you, your doctor doesn't know these numbers. And we'll get into that. I don't want to get too technical, but there's a term called absolute risk reduction versus relative risk reduction. Here's absolute risk reduction. You have 1,000 ladies in a study. Actually, this was a real study. This is for osteoporosis. Half of them get a placebo, half of them get the osteoporosis drug. The ones that got the placebo, 12 out of 1,000 had a hip fracture, and the other group, 8 out of 1,000 had a hip fracture. So there was a difference, a very, very small difference. And if you do the math on that, it's 0.04% difference. That's called absolute risk reduction. What the doctors are told and what comes up in the journal, when you read the journal, is they flip that to 40% risk reduction. That's called a relative risk reduction. They do some statistical gymnastics. They divide and multiply, and they massage that number a little bit. And it literally, I'll try to pull that study at lunch because it's not on this slide, because that sounds unbelievable. That there's no way. That's like lying, false advertising. But that's exactly the case. In fact, I do have one on statin here in a minute. It'll say 36% risk reduction. That's a big risk reduction if you take Lipitor. Well, the truth was 1%. I'll show you that here in a minute. Let's get into this, though. All right. Remember, y'all are the light out there, so y'all are going to learn this, and then you're going to go in love when the Holy Spirit tells you, speak the truth. Otherwise, this thing's not going to get turned around, because doctors are real stubborn about learning something new. I always start with this, because we got to be careful about what we think we know that just ain't so. And I used to would tell you for sure this causes heart attacks. Biscuits and gravy and bacon and eggs. In fact, when I first got married, I was in med school, halfway through med school. Jamie was from a ranching family, and we were in Houston. She moved from WT, where she's in school at Canyon. And we had a little 2-bedroom apartment. The second bedroom was my study, and I was in there studying diligently, and then she hollers at me, time for supper. And I come out of that little bedroom and can see across the little living room to the little dinette kitchen area. And I could see she had, on the table was a plate, a bowl of chili, and a plate with cornbread, piece of cornbread. But it had this thick layer of white on top. that from across the room it looked like icing. And I thought, man, what kind of family did she come from? They put icing on their cornbread. I mean, I've put syrup on cornbread before, but icing. And I get closer, I'm walking over there, and oh, that's butter. And I told her, Jamie, you can't do that. You're going to kill me. I'm going to have a heart attack eating butter like that. My granddad had a heart attack, and I'm going to have a heart attack if we eat this butter, this much of it, or really any at all. You need to start buying that I can't believe it's not butter stuff. And then she was buying whole milk. I said, babe, we can't do that. My granddad had a heart attack. We got to get skim milk. And she looked at me. I mean, the marriage almost ended right there. And like usually is the case, she ended up being right. And now look at me preaching and saying, no, this, and usually what I'll have is a box of Special K cereal or some kind of healthy cereal next to that, and I'll ask them, which one of these would you want to eat to avoid a heart attack? It turns out your heart muscle, which never gets a break, you get a calf cramp, you sit down and take a break if your coach will let you. But your muscle in here, it never gets a break. And the most efficient fuel for it to burn, saturated fat from that breakfast right there. That is the truth. And the studies prove it. I'm about to show you the study. This is a quote from George Mann, Dr. George Mann, which doesn't mean anything to y'all, but the Framingham study, if you ask your doctor, do you know about the Framingham study? Oh yeah, Framingham, that's a huge, huge study. It's multiple decades long, still ongoing now from Framingham, Massachusetts. They just followed this whole town basically and looked at all different health outcomes and their diet and their lifestyle and all this stuff. So Framingham, huge study, well-respected study. George Mann was the associate director of Framingham's study, and here's his quote: "A generation of citizens has grown up since Ansel Keys," which I'll tell you who that is in a minute. "Diet heart hypothesis was launched as official dogma. They have been misled by the greatest scientific deception of our time, the notion that consumption of animal fat causes heart disease." And this was pre-COVID, but the greatest deception of our time is what George Mann said. Here's what the Journal of the American College of Cardiology said, and this was August of 2020. They did a review study. What a review study means is they go back and just pull all the studies they can find on saturated fat and heart attacks. They read them all, and they summarize it and basically give you the Cliff Note summary version. And the conclusion they came up with: several foods relatively rich in saturated fatty acids, such as whole fat dairy, dark chocolate, unprocessed meat, are not associated with an increased cardiovascular, that's heart attack and stroke, disease or diabetes. There is no robust evidence that current population-wide arbitrary upper limits on saturated fat consumption in the U.S. will prevent heart disease or reduce mortality. Translation: we shouldn't tell anyone to not eat too much saturated fat. We never should have said that. There's another study, I think we'll get to it, that said they went back and looked at the original 1977, 78, 79, 1980 guidelines when the food recommendations came out, and they went back to try to find the data of why those guidelines came out. There wasn't any. And they concluded not only is there no current data, but even the previous, these guidelines never should have come out. There never was any data on that. What I want to point out from the same study, the Journal of American College of Cardiology, August of 20, you go to that study and you'll find health effects of saturated fatty acids depend on the interacting effects from naturally occurring food components and unhealthy compounds introduced by processing. That's the key. When we start to process food, now there's a way to process food more beneficially, more healthy, and there's a way to process it not so much. Typically what food producers are going to do is process it in a way that improves their bottom line output revenue generation, not that improves your mitochondrial function, which if you don't know what mitochondria is, you will by the end of today. But I want to just point that out. That's the big word right there. When man puts his hand on something, we better watch out. Doesn't mean it's off limits, but when man starts to mess with God's stuff, the food, did he do it with an intent to benefit your health and your cellular functions, or was it to benefit the pocketbook, Is there a way to do both? I mean, we just have to look at it. And usually, unfortunately, the answer's been no, not to benefit your health. Okay, so if cholesterol was the cause of heart attacks, then we should see a huge dramatic decline in heart attacks when you put half the population on statins to lower cholesterol, right? This is March of 22, JAMA. 21 randomized clinical trials they looked at, so a meta-analysis, kind of like a review study. They go and find a bunch of studies on statins, which are cholesterol-lowering drugs like Lipitor, Crestor, Zocor. 21 clinical trials they looked at. Here's what they found. Reductions in absolute risk of 0.8% for all-cause mortality, 1.3% for heart attack, and 0.4% for stroke. That's all the studies they could find on statins and heart attack, stroke, and all-cause death. 1.3, 0.4, and 0.8. That's what we're spending trillions of dollars on, not even getting into the side effects and what diseases the statins increase your risk of, like diabetes in women, 25%. But the point of this slide, from 2 years ago, this study was, is to make you think, we've got to be on the wrong track. If this is the best we can, and this is the number one prevention that doctors have, the tool. So here's one of the problems with medical school education is there's only 2 tools in the toolbox of the American medical graduate, prescription pad and a scalpel. And there's a time and place for both. I wrote 2 prescriptions my last day in clinic this week. Both were for blood pressure medicines. The one patient was 90 days into his time with us, and when he first came, he was on a 60 milligram blood pressure pill, and after 30 days, it got cut to 40, and I cut it this week to 20, and then he'll probably be off of it next month. So I wrote a prescription to lower it, and then I did that again, another blood pressure pill, lisinopril, 40, 20, 10. I wrote hers for 5. She really didn't need it, but the thought, the anxiety, she needs a little time to work through the fact that her body will be fine. Her blood pressure is getting normal, actually is normal now. So there's a time and place for prescriptions. The problem is we use them the wrong way. And this is literally what doctors do. It's because of what we're trained to do. Imagine sitting on your couch in your living room tonight watching some TV, which I don't really recommend. I don't watch TV, but I'm not going to judge you if you do. Maybe there's some good Pastor Ed on there. But the living room starts filling up with smoke. Obviously, there's a fire somewhere. Now, most people in house fires die from smoke inhalation, not actually getting burned to death. So maybe you hop up, open the front door, open the windows, and turn on the fan to clear that smoke out so you can breathe. That was your quick emergency fix. And then you sit back down on the couch and keep watching TV. That house is going to burn down, and your life expectancy is going to be shortened. The medications, diabetic medication, we'll talk about this afternoon, manages a problem. It doesn't fix the problem. We manage this smoke, and all this disease. It's lights on your dashboard going off, guys. Check engine, check this. It's a warning to you. So yeah, migraines are real for sure, and they can be devastating. I had a patient this week. He didn't even come. He's been with us about a year, and he just came for an annual. After his first visit, he never came back till his annual. And he came for some different diseases, but kind of a little side note, he had headaches multiple times a week for years. That was just part of life. He didn't even barely mention it in that first visit because, you just take ibuprofen and you're fine. Well, he mentioned this week, oh, Doc, you won't believe this. My headaches are totally gone. Now, I don't even have ibuprofen in my house anymore. And we weren't even focused on headaches. That was just another warning light on the dashboard going off. So all these things are warning lights on the dashboard going off. If you can get to the fire and put it out, then you're good. And that's what we'll be talking about, how to put this fire out. And that's really the problem with LDL is it's inflamed. Just real quick, one of the problems with the statins, The way a statin works is that blocks this enzyme that converts HMG-CoA into mevalonate. But that mevalonate is needed for so many things in the body besides cholesterol production, including CoQ10. That's a major molecule for your energy production of your carburetor. When we go to blocking God's pathways, there's unintended consequences of doing that. And I'll show you all the side effects, potential side effects of statins in a minute. But when you just clear the smoke and you don't get to the root, you're going to suffer still. And that's why we continue to have heart attacks, continue to die early compared to every other country. Here's the problem. Your God-given natural LDL, this slide calls it native LDL. I call it your God-given LDL. Your liver's making LDL all day long. You need it. You'll die without LDL. You'll die without cholesterol. Cholesterol is what all your hormones come from. Your cell membranes need it. Your brain's full of it. It's vital for life. And your liver makes it all day long. 80% of all the cholesterol in your body is because you made it. And if you quit eating cholesterol-rich foods, your body freaks out a little bit and it tells the liver, ramp up, start making more. They're not eating enough. You've got to have cholesterol. So this native God-given LDL, and it's called pattern A large buoyant, and it's right here. It's actually, the particle size is large. I call it big fluffy. Like a big fluffy cotton ball, just rolling down your artery wall, keeping it smooth and shiny. Not a problem at all. This one does not cause, not at all associated with heart attack. So I don't care if your LDL's 120, 150, 180, and I'll show you in a minute, you're actually going to want it higher if you want to live longer and healthier. That's what the studies show. But anyways, this one, it doesn't matter the number. The problem is, it can be transformed over time and compressed into this one, damaged LDL or inflamed LDL. This one is called pattern B, small dense. Think of that like a BB, small dense little BB going down your artery wall and kind of scraping that wall and starting that inflammatory process. And you can check your blood and see if your LDL's big fluffy or small dense, if you want to. Your doctor probably never heard of this. I never heard of it until I started digging and getting continuing medical education outside the standard system. And what I've come to kind of conclude is if there's not a patentable pharmaceutical that'll be available as an option, then we just don't even learn about this other stuff. There's no drug that'll switch you back from a small, dense BB up to the big, fluffy cotton ball. There's no drug that'll do that. What the drug does is just go right here in the liver and shut off the production. So your number on your paper, on your lab, when you go back to your doctor, oh, hooray, my cholesterol's down because my statins, my Lipitor's working. But remember, do you really care about a number on a paper, or do you care about death, heart attacks, stroke? And I just showed you the numbers of what that'll do. 0.4, 0.8, and 1.3, was it? So this is a key piece to remember. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, what gets me from my God-given LDL that my liver's making all day long down to this small BB? Your standard American living and eating and thinking. Fear that drives stress and cortisol up will do that, will move you down to small BB. Seed oils, that's the tiny little seeds. Cottonseed oil, that's Crisco. Margarine, soybean, corn oil. These seed oils as opposed to saturated fat from animals. Butter won't do this. Heavy whipping cream won't do that. Fat from the animals, tallow and lard won't do this. Seed oils will move you down here. Too much processed grain and processed sugar will move you down here. Processed. Those biscuits I showed you earlier, I didn't finish that story. Those biscuits were made from flour, this is going to sound crazy, that we produce on our countertop of our kitchen in about 20 seconds. We have a 5-gallon bucket of wheat berries. It stores forever, by the way. And I'm sorry, yep. We have a casualty. Y'all be real careful with the bread knife and with the 5-gallon bucket. But I've got a 5-gallon bucket of wheat berries in the pantry, and I get my cup, and I scoop out of there, and I throw it in my little grinder on the countertop, and in 20 seconds, I have my flour. And I make my biscuits and my gravy, or my waffles, or my pancakes, or my tortillas, or my bread, or cookies, or cake, or brownies. You can have those things. It's all about what type of flour. And what happened around 1920-ish, the millers who were milling, they figured, because if you mill that, you need to cook with it and consume it, or at least bake your thing pretty quick. Because when you grind that, there's wheat germ oil, and that wheat germ oil, once you grind it, it will go rancid over time. And so these millers, when they mill it and just put it in a sack, it will go rancid. It can't sit on the shelf for days and weeks and weeks and weeks as that fresh flour. And they figured out how to sift it. They sifted all that germ and bran out. And all that was left was the protein and starch, the white flour. And they were selling that to the feedlot, to the cows. This is in the 1920s. Well, pretty soon, people started getting sick in the southeast, is where all the mills were. And the psychiatric hospitals in particular started filling up with depression and psychosis. The health departments figured this out. It's the white flour. And they studied it and figured out there's no nutrition in it, no vitamins, no minerals. God put, we think, we don't fully know, somewhere between 30 and 50 different vitamins and minerals in that wheat berry. It's a superfood. But it all got sifted out. The government came and told the millers, y'all need to put that back in. People are getting sick and dying. They said, no, we're not doing that. We'll lose shelf life, and we have our secondary market over here, the feedlot. And they said, well, you at least got to enrich it somehow because these people are dying. So they put 4 man versions, synthetic versions, iron, and 3 different B vitamins they put back instead of all 30 to 50. So that kind of kept people from dying and getting psychotic, very quickly. It slowed the process down. And in 1998, they figured out they needed to put 1 more back in, folic acid, to help with neural tube defects. So, there's some benefit, but it's not the best. It's just kind of patching that thing up a little bit. So it's processed flour that I'm talking about. Enriched white flour, there's very little nutrition in it, and it turns into sugar super fast in your body. 2 pieces of whole wheat bread from the store change into sugar as fast as drinking a can of soda. So we have to be real careful with store-bought breads and flour. Get your wheat berries, make it yourself. And it's not, you don't have to be perfect. I don't want to come across as this health nut crazy dude, never have any, but there's good, better, and best. And when you learn better, try to do better. But don't make it your idol. We're going to talk about that tomorrow for sure. Because my mentor, I didn't tell y'all, the doctor who told me there's no such thing as diseases, he's no longer alive. And I think that it was a premature death, but he was perfect on nutrition, perfect on hydration, and perfect on movement. We talk about 4 pillars: nutrition, hydration, movement, which I'm all about, resistance training for sure. But peace. The last one's peace. And we'll get into it. We'll maybe talk some today later too, but definitely tomorrow we're going to talk more about that. And that's what I said. Fear will move you over. But what I'm saying, don't get so stressed out about I got to be perfect and mill my own bread only, and I can never eat that at the store or at a restaurant. It's not about being perfect. But it is about recognizing what a standard American life and diet look like and what the consequences of that are, and where I can start moving off little by little by little, move off that standard American road. Do that every inch, every step, every half step. You take off that standard American path onto a non-standard American or ancestral path, the better you'll be for it. And more importantly, your kids and grandkids. So even if you just flip out your table salt that has 3 minerals, next time when you run out of that one, go get your sea salt. God put 70 plus minerals in there. What does man do with God's stuff? We strip it out. So, just changing out your salt, super beneficial. Get to the wheat berries eventually, though, because it is so good. One piece of pizza with this kind of flour, you'll be filled up, almost guaranteed, even you big boys out there. It is so dense and filling, and it's so full of nutrition. I mean, when I make my kids waffles in the morning, waffles, bacon, and eggs, compare that to Lego My Eggo and whatever. I mean, it's completely different. It's not even in the same universe of a waffle. All right, let's keep going here. Here's this timeline. This is from my buddy, my colleague, Chris Kenobi. He was an ophthalmologist at UT Southwestern, really prestigious school, and he's a really smart guy. And he wanted to figure out, why are all these people going blind? The number one cause of blindness in America is macular degeneration. And he was seeing a ton of it. And it was exploding like everything else is, as far as the incidence of it. It used to be so rare, now like everybody's getting it. And he went to digging. And where he landed was what I'm telling you, these big three. Seed oils, processed sugar, processed flour. But the seed oils in particular. And that happened around the same time as milling. We started sifting the flour. Just before that, the steel press came in about the late 1800s, where we were able to finally press these hard little seeds, like a cotton seed, and get the oil out. And we first started using that as industrial lubricants, like for the machinery and the farm tractors. Cottonseed oil was just a lubricant. And then Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller, and the whole petroleum thing came along, so they started using that for lubricant, and they need a market for the cottonseed and started feeding the pigs. And the pigs fattened up real good, and then they figured out how to make this, because cottonseed oil is pretty nasty. It doesn't look good, it stinks, but they figured out how to bleach it, hydrogenate it, chemically alter it, and they put it into these tubs, real clean, put a nice label on it, and they went to all the housewives in the 19-teens and said, hey ladies, y'all don't need to render your own lard anymore. That's a messy job to render lard. Stinks up your house. Here, we have clean lard already packaged up for you. It was hydrogenated cottonseed oil called Crisco. That's where that started. And then soybeans and corn and rapeseed, that's canola. I'll show you a graph here in a minute. But that's when all this started kind of changing, right around here. There's that first case. John Herrick published it, 1912. MI means myocardial infarction. First heart attack ever. And then by 2010, number one cause of death. All right, so how did we get there? Early 1900s, there wasn't any interest in heart attacks because there weren't any. And then some guy decided to feed a bunch of rabbits who are herbivores, plant eaters, pure cholesterol from chicken eggs for 2 to 3 months, and what it caused was some fatty lipid deposits in the arteries of the rabbits. Well, it was way, way more cholesterol than a human would eat, and they weren't humans, they were rabbits. But that was the very first study that even considered this thought process going this way. They could not reproduce that study in omnivores or carnivores, so it pretty much got dropped until President Eisenhower had a heart attack in the late 1950s. He was in Denver, Colorado. Everybody kind of freaked out. The doctors there didn't really know what to do because they didn't see many heart attacks. They called back to Washington, D.C. and asked what they thought they should do, asked his doctors. But then people turned to this guy right here, Ancel Keys, and they said, Ancel, what do you think caused President Eisenhower's heart attack? Well, Ancel Keys was a guy that came up with the K rations in World War II, and that's what the K is for, Keys. And so he was kind of a national hero, helped to win the war and all that. He was respected. There's that Eisenhower's the front page article there. That's a picture of him in Denver. There's Ancel Keys, who had no education, heart disease, or nutrition. He'd taken a college biology, or had not taken a college biology course. He had a physiology PhD in fish physiology. But he had this theory, and we'll talk about this more today and tomorrow. Theory. Medicine, all the medical, it's all theory. And since 2020, actually, most of these theories have all been exposed as not true. The beta amyloid plaque theory of Alzheimer's, the original paper that started getting all the millions or billions probably of research dollars going to amyloid beta plaque. How do we rip out this amyloid beta plaque out of people's brains so they don't get dementia? The original study, fraud. It was in 2006 and it came out last year that it was fraudulent. And now the truth is known. There is amyloid beta plaque in the brain of Alzheimer's patients, but it's a response to oxidative stress in the brain. When there's so much free radical, and you'll learn here in a minute what free radicals are. Well, you'll learn it right now, actually. So your carburetors in your vehicle, carburetors, how do they work to make energy to turn your tires? You got to have fuel plus air. That's why you have an air filter. You got to make sure that air is clean that's going to mix with your fuel. But air and fuel mixed together needs a spark, so a spark plug. Boom, combustion happens. So what happens? Well, combustion creates energy to turn those tires, but also it produces heat. That's what your radiator fan deals with. And it produces exhaust going out the tailpipe. Yeah, that's simple. The exact same thing's happening inside your cells. Your heart muscle cells, your eyeball cells, your neuron brain cells, your hamstring cells, your white blood cells that gobble up COVID and flu and measles. All these cells have to make energy to do their job. To remember your kids' names, your neurons have got to fire off with energetic. So every cell has to make energy. ATP is what the energy is called in the cell. Well, your carburetor, it's called a mitochondria. And you have hundreds of them in every cell. Some cells have thousands. Well, your mitochondria takes in the fuel from what you eat. It's either sugar or fat that it's going to use. It's like it could burn gas or diesel. But sugar or fat for fuel, air from what you breathe, spark plug is minerals. Combustion happens, ATP. The exhaust, that's also where your body heat's coming from. But the exhaust, they're called free radicals. Oxidative stress. You heard of antioxidants? Antioxidants deal with those free radical exhaust. They gobble it up and clean it up. God gave you an antioxidant enzyme system. And what that means is you make your own antioxidant. It's fine to eat or take them. Blueberries have antioxidants, all these superfoods you hear about. Well, then that's fine. There's benefit to that. You should do that. But God gave you a system of cleaning up your exhaust. You need to steward that system. It needs minerals. We'll talk minerals later. But amyloid beta plaque, it's when there's too much exhaust, too much free radicals. So think of your vehicle. You're supposed to be getting 40 miles a gallon or whatever, and all of a sudden you're noticing, man, I'm only at like 10 miles a gallon, and there's a ton of black smoke going out my tailpipe. That carburetor needs tuned up. You tune that thing up, all of a sudden your miles per gallon's back up. You're making energy again efficiently, and your black smoke's way, way down. You're not making much exhaust. That's your mitochondria in your cell. If you don't give it the right inputs, you don't steward that thing, you're making a ton of free radicals and very little energy. Well, in the brain, that causes damage, all that black smoke, all that oxidative stress. And the body's those neurons are trying to defend itself. And amyloid beta plaque is part of that defense. It's trying to keep itself from dying, actually. So we go in there with these drugs trying to rip out amyloid beta plaque, and some do it okay. But outcomes, did it change outcomes? No, it didn't at all. Millions and trillions of dollars with no outcome because that theory was wrong. We thought amyloid beta plaque was the cause of dementia. No, it's a response to all the oxidative stress. You get that mitochondria tuned up in your neuron, those carburetors tuned up, your oxidative stress goes down, you won't be making beta amyloid plaque. But that's one theory. We'll see later a theory of serotonin causing depression. The study came out in 22. The American Journal of Psychiatry said there's no evidence of that, never was any evidence of it. But this theory, so how to get started? It's this guy. This theory that saturated fat and cholesterol in the diet causes heart attacks. Remember, this is a theory that George Mann, the very first slide I showed you, George Mann said the greatest deception ever in medicine. This is Ancel Keys. This is it. This is what Ancel published. Put him on the front page of Time magazine because of this. It's called the 7 Countries Study. And what he showed on this graph, the countries that eat the most saturated fat, way up here, United States, Canada, Australia, they have the most heart attacks. And the ones that eat the least amount of fat, like Japan, have the least amount of heart attacks, right? Looks pretty convincing. If you saw that graph and read that article in Time magazine, you'd go for it. You'd quit eating that. Well, the problem was, it wasn't a 7-country study. It was a 21-country study. And he took out the 15 countries that didn't fit his theory. France had the most saturated fat consumption of any country. They ate the most butter of anybody. And they had the least heart attacks of anybody. Remember earlier I told you this muscle never gets a break, and the most efficient fuel for it to burn for energy is saturated fat. That's what the French were doing. They had the least heart attacks of anybody. But it doesn't fit the theory, so we'll just remove that data. We'll take that country out of the equation. I know that sounds hard to, well, maybe it doesn't sound hard to believe because so much corruption and deception is being exposed in the last little bit. Every lie will be revealed. This is the #1 killer in America. We're using all these statins to try to deal with it, and it's rooted in this study right here that was fraudulent. And I'm not the only, I didn't figure this out. I'm not the only guy saying this has been known for a while. There's plenty of cardiologists who know this truth, but you'll never hear from them. I didn't hear from them in medical school. I didn't read the books that they published. They're not on TV. You have to go hunt. You have to go find. You have to go dig for that truth. So right after he produced this study, because people didn't know that. That didn't come out. I think Ancel wrote a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine. I believe it was in 91. Don't quote me on that, but basically confessed. I'm sorry, I was wrong. This whole cholesterol thing. But so back then, doctors didn't know that. Most still don't today. But the doctors at the time were like, wait a minute, this kind of doesn't make sense. Especially the old doctors. Because they knew their patient had been eating saturated fat, and we used to never see heart attacks. How could this be? We've got to replicate Ancel Keys' study. We got to do it again and see maybe he did something wrong. So they did the Minnesota coronary experiment. From 1968 to 1973, 9,000 patients. Half of these patients got vegetable oil, and the other half got the regular saturated fat. And here's what happened. The LDL decreased in the vegetable oil group, but no change in death. And in fact, for every 1% drop in cholesterol, there was a 1% increase in mortality with the vegetable oil group. So the cholesterol went down, mortality goes up, but they did not publish that paper until 2016. It went into a filing cabinet. Literally. In 2016, it was discovered and published. The next study was a Sydney Diet Heart study. Right after the Minnesota one, same exact result. LDL went down with vegetable oil. Death went up. And this is a bold statement, but no evidence in the preceding 40 years since then. And I'm going to show you some of those. So, margarine use started going up. That's the red line. Butter started going down. You see the years from 1900 to 1999. And heart disease, deaths from heart disease start rising. That's called correlation. Correlation doesn't mean causation, but it should mean investigation, is how I like to say. And it has been investigated. And I would say firmly concluded. There's all that on one graph. So, keep it simple. God's version of food's always going to be better than man's version. But a good rule of thumb is flip it over, read the ingredients, and if you can't pronounce them, you don't know what they are, they're chemical, they're more than 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients, then you better take a time out and pause and really consider if you're going to put that in your mouth, as you see here with margarine versus butter. So this is over time. The animal fats are in blue, vegetable oils in orange. You can see the consumption way up versus down. And that timeline again. Okay, so this guy, nutrition and physical degeneration, Dr. Ancel Keys, he was a scientist. And I like to remind, especially the kids, science is observation of nature. It's observing God's amazing design. I should have put a picture of these. We have peacocks, and the other night they were all fanned out, and I took a picture. And those feathers, if you've not ever seen a peacock up close, it's amazing the symmetry of how did God make those to all line up, and some are short, and then a little longer than the real long ones. But they're all just perfect when they fan them out. But anyways, just observing God's creation, that's science. You observe. Now, as we're observing all the miracle like that peacock, I could start thinking, I have a theory, I have a hypothesis of how that peacock feather actually does that. And they drop those feathers every year and they grow new ones. And where do those come from? So you can guess, you can have a guess. And then you run experiments to see if your guess was right. And that's fine to do that. The problem is when we guess wrong, but then there's some money and some fame and your title and your position and all this stuff is attached to it, and we're not good at saying, I'm sorry I was wrong, and then there's a bazillion dollars involved, it's a problem. But what Dr. Weston Price, he was a dentist in Cleveland, Ohio. In the 1920s, he writes in this book that he started noticing something really weird. Americans, in his dental patients in Cleveland, Ohio, are starting to get this thing called hypertension, high blood pressure, arthritis, malignancies, tumors, heart attacks. These are all new things. He'd never seen them before. And he's now starting to see them in his patients in his dental practice. And he goes home and tells his wife, something going on here in America, or at least in Cleveland, and we need to go travel the world and see, is this happening everywhere? There are people groups that aren't seeing this. And so they did. They left Cleveland. He and his wife spent the next 10, 15 years traveling the world. They went up into Canada and found some indigenous Native Americans there and lived with them for about a year and documented what they ate and how they lived. Moved over to Alaska, did the same thing, found some natives there. Lived there for a while, documented they're eating, whale and seals and, a lot of saturated fat and a few blueberries here and there. But then he went across the Orient and then the South Pacific Islands, a lot of coconuts and seafood. Then went down to the Amazon rainforest, lived there for a year. Then he went across the Atlantic to the British Isles, the Swiss Alps, and then into Africa. 14 different groups all over the world. And he put it all in this book. And basically, in a nutshell, I'm going to boil it down. It's a thick book. If you're really into nutrition, all the med students and residents and doctors that call me, I tell them, get it. And you need to read it because it's amazing. But the basic story is people that ate native ancestral food, they're healthy. They had no malignancies, no arthritis. Mental health was all good. He noted that in the book. Dental, perfect teeth. No crooked teeth, no cavities, just perfect human health when they were eating their native ancestral diet. But as soon as a Western missionary, he noted, it was usually a missionary, or if it was a village right by the port, right by the ocean where ships could get in easy. But white flour and processed sugar, when those two ingredients moved into a village within one generation, he started to see degeneration, crooked teeth and degeneration in health. And even, I think it was in the Swiss Alps, he noted the villages that were eating modern food, is what he called it, modern food, were susceptible to tuberculosis and were dying from tuberculosis. But the villages that were just 10 miles away but eating their native diet, he called them tuberculosis resistant. Tuberculosis just wasn't doing anything to those villages. He described one village, the guys are so strong they could carry 100 pounds in their left hand, 100 pounds in their right hand, and 100 pounds in their teeth. They're just strong and fit and healthy and vibrant, and the germs didn't kill them. There's just some of the map of where he went to the South Pacific and different places. Back to cholesterol and heart disease, they've done studies in some of these native tribes, like these islanders, lots of saturated fat. This is 1981, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. So very uncommon to have vascular disease. That's heart attack and stroke, even though there's lots of saturated fat in the diet. There was one of the first studies. This one, Eskimos, I don't know what year this was, but same thing. The Eskimos had a lot of saturated fat, very little heart disease. The Maasai tribe, they ate pretty much exclusively red meat. They ate cow, drank cow milk, cow blood, and almost no heart disease. Familial hypercholesterolemia, that's a big fancy word for there's a gene mutation in certain family lines, and this mutation causes these people to make tons of cholesterol. Like their cholesterol will be 600, 700, 800, really, really high. So they went and found all these and they traced these family trees back to the 1800s, and they wanted to know, do these families have more heart attack, more stroke, more medical problems? And the answer was no. Our study provides no evidence. This is 1966, so right after that Minnesota, right around the time of that Minnesota, no evidence that this familial hypercholesterolemia shortens life. Survival into the 7th and 8th decades was normal, like everybody else. Here's another one, family trees from the 1800s to 1900s. But what they went on to say was these families, not only do they not have heart attack and stroke, there's less cancer and less infectious disease death like influenza and pneumonia, and better overall health. Hypercholesterolemia may have conferred a survival advantage. Totally opposite. High cholesterol helps you live longer and healthier, less dementia, less cancer, less death from infectious disease. This is just another study, Journal of American Heart Association, 2014, and it says the same thing. Overall, when they looked at it, no overall adverse effect of high cholesterol on longevity, normal lifespan in people with familial hypercholesterolemia. So that should be a big question mark. If high cholesterol causes heart attacks, then why aren't these families all dying early from heart attacks? Here's another one. This was Lancet. That's a pretty prestigious journal, 2001. And I'm going to go through a lot of studies. It might be a little boring at this part of the talk, but it's because I'm hammering this thing home through the intellect. Because we've kind of, I'll say we, doctors for sure. I'm not going to say y'all are, but a lot of the public is too. We've submitted to this thing called scientism. It's a religion. The spirit of intellectualism. Prove it to me. Show me the study. I'll show you here later, maybe this afternoon. The majority of all studies are wrong. That's a Nobel Prize winner. Dr. John Ioannidis published that. And the editor-in-chief of Lancet, the editor-in-chief of New England Journal, both said the same thing. All these published studies, the majority are corrupted, and they're false. And we've submitted to that, and we get fearful and scared about something. We've got to get back to, come, let us reason together. You can gain some knowledge. A wise man seeks much wise counsel, but ultimately you ask the Holy Spirit, the counselor, reason together with Holy Spirit, and He will lead you into all truth. And if fear is coming in, then automatic it's a timeout. Spirit of fear is not from God. If fear is driving any decision making, we've got to pause and go study more if you need to, but I'm going to tell you that studying and trying to prove something can be an idol. The Holy Spirit will lead you into that truth. Okay, but back to the study. Increased mortality in elderly people with low serum cholesterol. Exact opposite. The elderly with low cholesterol died more often than people with higher cholesterol. Here's another study, the Annals of Nutritional Metabolism, 2009. Intake of total fat was not significantly associated with coronary events or mortality. Intake of saturated fat was not associated with coronary events or mortality. Fatal heart disease was not reduced by low-fat diets. Here's another one, 2010, a meta-analysis. That's when they go and analyze all the studies they could find on the subject. This was a large meta-analysis, over 350,000 participants, no association with saturated fat and heart disease. This is another one from 2010, another prospective study, Japanese, 58,000 men, 14 years, so that's a big, good study. It's a long study, lots of people in it, found no association between saturated fat intake and heart disease. An inverse association between saturated fat and stroke, meaning the more saturated fat you ate, the less stroke you had. No relationship or no increased heart attacks, and actually decrease your strokes. This one's on eggs in particular. Oh, when I hear someone order an egg white omelet, I have to bite my tongue or ask the Holy Spirit real fast, can I go tell them the truth? I'll take that egg yolk, double mine if they're not going to eat the best part. But I'd like to whip out this study, British Medical Journal, 2013, prestigious journal. This meta-analysis identified no significant association between egg consumption and risk of heart attack or stroke. Here's another one, Open Heart, that's a big journal too, 2015. The present review concludes that dietary advice not merely needs review, this is the low-fat advice. Not only does it need reviewed, it should not have been introduced. This is what I was telling you about earlier, when those very first low-fat guidelines came out. This study went back to analyze that, 1977 and 83, those guidelines. Why did those guidelines come out? Who told us to go low-fat? Where was the evidence for that? That's what these authors wanted to know. And they couldn't find it. And so that was their conclusion. These guidelines should have never been introduced. But we're not good at saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So I'm pretty sure no one's said it to this day. All right, this one reviewed every paper ever published on cholesterol and longevity. Not a single study shows high cholesterol equals more death. This is a huge point to always remember for anything, not just cholesterol, but it's called all-cause mortality. For any medical advice, prescription drug, or surgery, or whatever, what's the all-cause mortality? Because if we just focus on one, like a number, like LDL cholesterol. Is my cholesterol high or is it low? Oh, good, it came back low this time. That doesn't actually matter. What you care about is who's dying. All-cause mortality, that's what that means. Does it reduce death? Because even if it reduced heart attacks, but what if for some reason it increased something else and you still died younger using this therapy? So we can't get too laser focused on one thing like that. We got to keep the big picture in mind. The body's so complex, one thing affects lots of different things. This is Lancet 2018. They looked at full-fat dairy. Surprise, surprise, what they found was less death with full-fat dairy than low-fat dairy. You're kind of seeing the theme here, hopefully. We already went through this one, but this was a big study because it was a review study, and it was from this particular journal. That's the cardiologist Bible journal right there. And they went back and reviewed all the data, and that's what they concluded. Saturated fat does not associate with heart disease. I already showed you all that part. And that one, this is a statin study from March of 22 that's basically said, yep, statins are doing pretty much nothing. Oh, the little bit of benefit. Remember the LDL, big fluffy, small dense? So the statins they do have an anti-inflammatory effect a little bit, so they help decrease the inflammation on that small BB a little bit. So that's the little bit, the 0.8% benefit. But there's way better ways to decrease inflammation, because inflammation's the key. Inflamed cholesterol. There's better ways to decrease inflammation on that cholesterol than taking a statin. Okay, I already showed you all that. So there's your standard American. I don't know if I finished that. Not just the seed oils. Seed oils are probably number one after fear. Stress will absolutely do it. Stress, 100. I'm telling you guys. I had a guy, he had a heart attack. He was one of our patients. He was kind of a little bit upset. He wanted to have an appointment with me. He sees one of our nurse pracs. And he went through his 3 pillars. I mean, he's buying this grass-fed beef. It's so expensive. And he's taking all these supplements. And he's eating perfect. And he's got raw milk and fermented food and all the stuff. And he was running. I recommend walking and lifting weights, getting your muscles going. But he was exercising. He was moving and hydrating perfect. Only water. He'd cut out the Cokes. Man, why do I have a heart attack still? Well, tell me about your peace pillar. Oh, he broke down crying. He's a big real estate guy with big ranch cattle, or just farm and ranch land and oil field stuff and big deals, $1 million deals. And some went south that year and just massive stress. 12, I said on a 1 to 10 scale, and he said 12. And we'll talk about here in a second how that is. What does that stress actually do to your heart muscle and your coronaries that causes that? But here's the other things. Smoking, sitting, lack of sunlight, low oxygen at night. There's lots of contributing factors to that small BB being produced. But what all these things do, they affect your carburetor. If you're sleeping at night and everything kind of collapses down on you, your tongue falls back in the roof, and the roof of your mouth falls down, and everything kind of just, your airway goes from a wide diameter to a very small diameter. That's called sleep apnea. You just don't get enough oxygen all night long. So for 6, 7, 8 hours at night, your oxygen level's at 88, 89, 90. That's not good. Your brain has an oxygen sensor, and it senses your oxygen's not good, so it doesn't let itself go into that deep restorative sleep. The deep restorative sleep, you got to hit that to get your growth hormone produced at night. Growth hormone should be called repair hormone. God gave you a self-cleaning repair mechanism that kicks in every night when you go into deep sleep. So you're going to clean up the oxidative stress, all the black smoke that might have damaged some of your cells. You're going to clean a lot of that up every single night. But if your airway's compromised, your oxygen level's low, you're not going to get into that deep sleep. You'll miss that cleaning mode. So that's where the low oxygen. But also, when you sit all day, and especially if you tend to sit stressed, which a lot of Americans do, and you just think about fight or flight, think about getting in a position to fight somebody or to run, get in the starting blocks and start running. Those muscles, they're called flexor muscles. All those flexors engage, and you don't get a deep belly breath when your stress muscles are engaged. So sitting compromises deep belly breathing. Stress compromises deep belly breathing. And you got to get the deep belly breathing to really have a good oxygenation. The other thing that impedes that oxygen, because it's got to get from your airway through your lungs, through down to the mitochondria, to your carburetor. Well, you've got 7 layers of cell membranes. Cell membranes are made of fats. Certain fats repel oxygen. Other fats attract oxygen to come through real easily. Vegetable oils repel. Saturated fat allows the oxygen through real easily. So there's a lot to that oxygen thing. Sunlight, I think I'll show you a book later, Dr. Malcolm Kendrick out of the UK. He showed a study that showed sunbathers, people that just get out in the sun every day. 10 years it adds to longevity versus a statin will give you 3 days. Oh, going back to Eisenhower. Cigarette consumption. He was I think it was a 4-pack a day. Yeah, 4-pack a day chain smoker. And I'm sure he was stressed. I imagine he was consuming seed oils. Here's I mentioned earlier, deception. This is an actual magazine advertisement. Lipitor, 36% reduction in heart attack. But see the little star right there, little asterisk. Anytime you see a little asterisk, usually that's a big warning sign. Go down here and read what that says. In a large clinical study, 3% of patients taking a sugar pill had a heart attack, compared to 2% of patients taking Lipitor had a heart attack. 3 minus 2, at least at Leon Heights Elementary in Belton, Texas, where I learned math, is 1. So that's called absolute risk reduction. 3 minus 2 is 1. A 1% difference. So how did they get to put 36% on there and get away with it? If I put on my website that cod liver oil will help you overcome measles, the Federal Trade Commission is going to send me a letter and say that's false advertising. The FDA has not approved that statement and you need to take it down or we're going to fine you $10,000. This is a huge problem in medical school education. We get quoted relative risk reduction, which is this number, all the time. The drug reps bring in a big shiny poster board with that bar graph, 36%. I remember when Lipitor drug reps came around. It's generic now, so they don't. But back when I was in residency in Waco, Texas, and I remember the residents, one in particular, because the drug reps brought samples, and he would just start taking these samples every day of Lipitor because of that number. This is an article from Medscape, and there's what I'm talking about. In this article, when a doctor goes and looks it up, or the general public, they see it in the headline and they see it in the article. And there'll be words, I'll show you here in a minute, these words like amazing, miracle, unbelievable. There's actual numbers. We don't need to go through all that. That's more for when I have doctors in the room. But that's what it should have said. 1% reduction, which obviously is not too great, and they wouldn't have made a nice shiny advertisement about that. Here's some of the headlines. This is for a Crestor study. This is across the board. Crestor, Zocor, Lipitor. I was just picking on Lipitor on that one. But here's one on Crestor, the Jupiter study. Spectacular. This is a doctor in Amsterdam who co-authored the study. This doctor from Cleveland Clinic, breathtaking, blockbuster, paradigm shifting, this new Crestor drug. New York Times, 50% less likely to suffer a stroke or need angioplasty or bypass. What was that huge, amazing, spectacular, breathtaking, ground-shattering, earth-shattering? 0.4% reduction. But they said 54%. New York Times right there, that was the quote, cut in half. They were using relative risk reduction number for their marketing and advertisement and news, quote-unquote news shows, when it was less than 1%, the Crestor study. In this book by David Brownstein, and this is the one I recommend, When the Holy Spirit Leads You in Love, if your doctor's actually curious, you give this to him for a Christmas present. Because these are the names of the studies over here. He did, I think it's 15, the top 15 studies on all these drugs. Ascot and Jupiter down here at the bottom are the ones I was quoting from. But then it has absolute risk reduction, the AR. AR is absolute risk. You can go right down and show them. Versus RR, relative risk reduction, the numbers that look better. But the average of all those together is the 0.8%. That's what that Journal of American College of Cardiology showed. That's what David Brownstein's book shows too. So it's all in there. That's an easy read. That book's for the layperson. It's real thin, real easy read, big print. But it's great for doctors because, I mean, a doctor would learn a lot reading that. There's just more detail of that with the math to prove it. And that book talks about the potential side effects of statins. You remember the one graph, if you block that enzyme, it's going to lead to, well, here's a number of them, but there's over 200 different potential side effects. Because the enzyme that makes cholesterol doesn't just do that. It's the way God made our body, that enzyme's going to affect lots of other pathways too. So you go to blocking this cholesterol pathway, you just blocked a whole bunch of other stuff also. And that's why it can lead to so many different things. All right, so what does cause heart attacks? Here's that book. I mentioned The Clot Thickens by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. If you really want to kind of nerd out on it or just get super informed and educated, that's a good one. It's a great read. He's got dry humor that's really hilarious too. And then that's where I got that stat on sunbathing and 10 years longevity versus a stat in 3 days. I also interviewed Dr. Malcolm Kendrick on my radio show, or it's a podcast too. And all those are on the website. So you can go to the website, go to the podcast page, and just go, well, we have it. You can type in his name, or we have a drop-down menu of subjects, and I have a heart attack cholesterol subject you can click on, and there's lots of interviews, but he's one of them. And then human heart, cosmic heart. I think we'll have time to get into this a little bit. I want to save time for Q&A because we got to wrap it up by noon. It's about 11:30, but I want y'all to be able to ask questions. So I'll just kind of summarize that clogged artery theory, that saturated fat, like bacon grease in your kitchen sink pipe just clogs it up. That theory, that is not at all. I mean, when you eat fat, obviously it goes into your stomach. Your stomach starts to break that down, but really it triggers your gallbladder to squirt bile, and bile really breaks it down. So you're breaking down fat into fatty acids. Fatty acids are then absorbed and to the liver, and the liver decides to do whatever it wants to do with them. Protein is like steak is broken down into amino acids, and same thing. Those are absorbed to the liver, and then the liver decides what it wants to build with those amino acids. So you just break down food into building blocks. The building blocks go to the liver, and the liver builds stuff. So that whole theory completely debunked. Inflamed heart theory, sort of true, because those mitochondria, when you don't give that mitochondria the right fuel and the right oxygen and the right minerals to produce enough energy, it gets inefficient. Miles per gallon go down, black smoke goes up. Oxidative stress, that's inflammation. Anytime you hear the word inflammation, think of carburetor not tuned up. So the inflamed heart theory is halfway true because there is inflammation going on. But really what happens is, I think more, it's a starved heart theory. That heart muscle, all day long, it never gets a break. All night, all day, for all your years, it's got to move, pump, contract, 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 contract. If you're feeding vegetable oil, the heart-healthy vegetable oil, it's the exact opposite. But you feed that vegetable oil, you feed processed sugar, you feed processed grain that only has 4 or 5 now nutrients instead of 50. What happens over time is this carburetor is getting choked down. It's not getting enough oxygen because those 7-cell membranes, remember, oxygen can't get through very good. You have choked down the air line, you've choked down the fuel line. So literally that carburetor, but it can never have a break though. It is so inefficient. It's doing all it can to keep up. So that's a piece. You've starved your carburetor down. At the same time, and this is where the stress comes in, it turns out this heart pump isn't a pressure pump where it generates force and pressure to push that blood. It's a hydraulic. It's creating a vortex and a pressure. Hydraulic is sucking or pulling. So this heart is really creating a force to pull the blood through your circulatory system. The inner lining of your blood vessels, of your pipes, should have a slick inner layer called the glycocalyx. It's kind of like shag carpets, these little hair fibers almost. And intermingled amongst the shag carpet hair fibers is this gelatin-like water. It's called structured water, H3O2, not H2O. So think of like a liquid gelatin, kind of like Jell-O, but a little more liquidy. It has a negative charge to it, like magnets that you put together, but if you flip it, where they repel, negative to negative, So the way God designed this amazing system, a hydraulic that's pulling, but with this negative charge on the inner slick layer, it basically propels those red blood cells up, just like those 300-foot tall sequoias. How does water get up from the roots against gravity? There's this propulsion that's happening because of the negative repelling charge in that wall. So a hydraulic sucking force, that negative charge, it just flows. It's beautiful. This negative charge, though, can be diminished, and gone. So you're losing some of that flow force. When you lose that slick inner layer, you also lose integrity or strength of the wall. So the wall starts to want to collapse in on itself, like you're sucking on a straw real hard. Because of that hydraulic suck, that hydraulic force. And now that wall's weakened, it's starting to fall down on itself and narrow down on itself. And the body, just like amyloid beta plaque in the brain, the body tries to stiffen that up. It's trying to save itself. It lays down calcium. You go get a coronary calcium score, shouldn't have any in there. The more you have, the more risk of a heart attack's coming. The body's doing that on purpose. This artery's about to close on itself. So it's stiffening, trying to stiffen up, atherosclerotic plaque, hardening of the arteries, stiffening up, all that. It's trying to keep that thing open because you've lost your inner lining, the glycocalyx. The number one way to lose your negative charge and lose that lining is chronic cortisol. That's a stress hormone, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. So when you stay in this state of stress for years and years and years and years, while you're starving down, choking down your carburetor of your heart muscle. So now we've got a carburetor choked down. We've been under stress all the years, so now our coronary arteries are weakened. The body's trying to keep them open with calcium and plaque and trying to stiffen them and harden them. So that's the scenario. We've got these hard pipes trying to collapse on themselves. We've got a choked down mitochondria, but you're still going to work every day and you're still trying real hard. And the amazing thing about God's design, the body, this heart muscle, which never gets a break, and now it's not getting good oxygen because that wall, those arteries, it will grow. It'll sprout another artery to go around that spot in your wall, in your coronary that's starting to be blocked down. 50%, 80, 90, 100%. Your body grows its own bypass around that. It's called a collateral. It's incredible the way God made this. And when they shoot that dye in there, it doesn't go into the collateral. It only goes to that main artery, and that has to do with the flow dynamics of a heavy dye. But they're in there. There is a way to do it, and I've seen the photos. It's like a root ball. Amazing how all the collaterals. But anyways, so this is the environment you've got. You've got this chronic stress, choked down mitochondria, these walls that are falling in, and then suddenly there's a sympathetic surge. What that means is you get a sudden cortisol, sudden adrenaline. You have a stress event. You suddenly ask that, you put the pedal to the floor trying to get around the 18-wheeler on a little 2-lane road. You ask that heart suddenly, you put epinephrine, you put that surge to it from a stress event, and that mitochondria, your carburetor, tries to hit it, can't, it fails. It literally, the mitochondria cannot produce energy. It flips, as a life-saving last-ditch effort, it flips a switch called anaerobic metabolism, where it's trying to make you some energy. It's only 2 miles per gallon. And it creates lactic acid. Anaerobic metabolism makes lactic, and that lactic acid in your heart muscle cell changes the pH of that cell, and necrosis, the cell dies. You get enough of that, all those cells die, and suddenly part of that muscle can't squeeze right in because it's dead. That's a myocardial infarction. The coronary artery in that moment completely falls in on itself. No more blood flow through the coronary, so a blood clot develops upstream because the blood can't flow anymore. There's your massive heart attack. And that's why studies have shown this. This is going to sound even crazier if I'm not already sounding crazy. Stents and bypass surgeries have not been proven to prevent future heart attacks. If you're having a heart attack right this minute, that whole process I just laid out, that thing collapsed and you have a blood clot right there, if you can get to the ER real fast, they can go in there and angioplasty, they can suck that clot out, balloon that thing open, or stent you and get that flow reestablished real fast. You're having a heart attack right this second, yes, a stent can be very beneficial. But the vast majority of stents aren't placed like that. The vast majority are put in because you're having a little pressure and tightness and pain when you're mowing your lawn or carrying in the groceries or climbing upstairs. And after maybe 10 times of this, because you're stubborn, you finally go to the doctor and tell him. He says, sounds like angina. We better do a stress test, cath you. Oh, yeah, there's 90% blockage. Let's put a stent in. They've done studies. That scenario, that stent doesn't prevent the future heart attack. So statins aren't preventing it. Now the stents aren't preventing, and that's why we see every single year still the same number one leading cause of death, because we're just not getting to the root cause. So we got to go deeper. Well, there it is. Stents don't prevent heart attack or death. That was from a long time ago, 2007. And Harvard or Stanford even said that. Stents and bypass surgeries show no benefit in heart disease mortality rates among stable patients. That means you're not having a heart attack right this minute. So I don't want to get confused. If you're having a heart attack right this minute, go to the ER and get a stent. But that is not, we don't need to get to that point to begin with. But I don't want to come across as don't do that ever. It's just most of them don't go in that way. So it's a false sense of security. That's my biggest beef. We're giving out all these statin drugs. We're doing all these stents, and these guys and gals, but guys tend to be more stubborn, it seems like. They're walking around out there, still stressed, still eating heart-healthy vegetable oils, still being a standard American, thinking my statin and my stent are going to prevent my heart attack death. And where the studies are clear that it doesn't. Okay. I think we talked about most of this already. But you can get all this and more in Dr. Kendrick's book or on the interview. So, tune up the carburetor. That's the key. Don't be a standard American. Be an ancestral American or just an ancestral person. Sunlight, strength training, I would rather you go, and this is actually a cardiologist at Kansas City, University of Kansas City. Forget his name. I'll think of it in a minute. But he did a review study on longevity. What's the best exercise to do? The people that live to be 90, not in a nursing home, healthy, what were they doing? They were not running on a treadmill, getting their cardio for an hour every single day. They sure weren't running marathons. Here's the sweet spot that he found. They didn't sit. They got steps. 10,000 steps a day. Walking, gardening, golfing, just up, move, walk, move, don't sit. That was the sweet spot. And 60 minutes a week of resistance training. And I think you can do a little more than that, but the point is you don't have to be crazy. I'm going to go, work out, lift heavy for an hour every single day. No. It needs to be quality. It needs to be actually put a load on. And if you haven't done that, get a trainer, do it the right way, don't get hurt. But I'm telling you, I'd rather you go put load on this muscle because 80% of your carburetors are in the muscle. You want to tune those carburetors up, you got to engage the muscle. So resistance training, really, really big. Salt, this isn't a salt lecture. I have a whole nother lecture on that, but I'm just going to tell you the same deception on salt is cholesterol. Salt doesn't kill you. Salt doesn't raise your blood pressure. You need God's salt, not man's salt. And we are demineralized. We all get it with our cattle. If you don't have a salt block out for your cows, you're not going to be as healthy. They're not going to gain weight as good, more pink eye and infection. Their fertility rates aren't, all the things. We got to get a salt block for yourself. Put it on your nightstand. Lick it every single time you go by it. I put salt in my water, and that sounds crazy, but start small, pinch, and then you can work up. Salt your food. You need salt. They used to fight wars over salt. Our ancestors consumed, on average, tablespoons of salt per day. Sleep, sustenance, real food. God food, not man food. So the real food is in the perimeter of the grocery store. And I know grocery stores, you still got to be careful. Be best in your garden, from your own ranch, get your neighbor's cow that he's raising for you. Fill your freezer full of it. Raise as much as you can yourself or your neighbors or farmers markets. That's the best. But perimeter of the grocery store, your produce, your meat, and your dairies on the perimeter, all that stuff in the middle is packaged. You got to be real careful with packaged. I mean, you can, but just be knowledgeable. Like spaghetti sauce, which you could make yourself, but there's spaghetti, but flip it over, read on the jar, and if it says tomatoes and olive oil and sea salt and garlic, that's 4 ingredients. Those are all real food. You know what they are. Your great-great-grandma would know what those 4 things were. Then get that one. But then there's the other one that's probably a 2-for-1 special that's only costs 99 cents. You flip it over, and it's got some tomatoes in it, but then it's got 5 or 6 things you don't even know what it is. And it's got 12 different ingredients, and it's got high fructose corn syrup, sugar on steroids. Their goal is to sell you food. They put sugar in the food to make you addicted. If it ends in OSE, that's sugar. There's code names. There's 40 different code names for sugar. It's not just going to say sugar necessarily. High fructose, OSE. They did a study with rats. They gave this group of rats in a cage cocaine water for a few days, shut it off, gave them sugar water for a few days, shut it off, and did free choice. They go either one. They all went to the sugar water because it jacked up their dopamine more. That's the pleasure hormone, your addiction hormone. The tobacco industry, when they saw they were going down, they moved all their food, they bought up the food companies, moved their addiction scientists from tobacco over to the food to figure out how to get humans hooked on food. And sugar's a big one. So, God version of sugar, honey, great. There's actually medicinal properties to that. Organic maple syrup, great. And even some sugar, like a raw, unprocessed sugar, occasionally, that's fine too. And then sunlight eating window, what that means is basically if the sun ups, eat. When the sun goes down, quit eating. That's a good little guide. But the studies will tell you if you keep your eating window under 12 hours, you decrease your risk of heart attack, stroke, and just about every other disease. So just don't be grazing all night long is what I'm saying. All right. Yep. I think this is the last one. What's love got to do with it? I read this study the other day. It was crazy. 1,000 men, or 10,000 men in the study were asked, does your wife show you her love? And found that those who answered yes had 50% lower rate of angina than the ones who didn't. So wives, tell your men you love them. All right, questions. There's a bunch of books you can learn more about, but yes, sir. A stressor in a way. Oh, woo. Come Sunday, and I'll answer that. But yeah, he's asking a stressor and how you view the stress, because it's really not your circumstance. It's really how you're seeing that circumstance, and that's a deep question. There's no way to do that in 15 minutes, but I will touch on it Sunday because it's huge, absolutely huge. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It's not what the mother-in-law is doing, it's how you see her. And you need God's eyeballs on her. Is that your mother-in-law? Oh. But yeah, it's a big, big, big deal, huge deal. Because there's no way we can keep our circumstances all from, especially the way the world is now. But great question. Sunday we'll answer it. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Yep. Well, you first get educated, get the book maybe so you can speak to it, or you could just say, okay, thank you, that's good to know, I'll work on that. I don't care for a statin, and just like not talk about it. But if they were asking me, I would say, doctor, do you know the risk reduction that she's going to have with the statin? Probably she doesn't know the absolute risk, so I would tell her it's 0.8%. Do you know the risk you're about to put her on to get diabetes is 25%? You know, there's all that data out there, but for a person to argue with the doctor about data, it's just hard to do that. But what I tell my patients, a lot are still worried, they'll have that high LDL and high total cholesterol. They'll be flagged on the Quest lab. It's flagged. I'll tell them, look at your HDL and triglyceride. What are those? Because those actually have some predictive value. Total and LDL, they're not predictive at all. I mean, half the people with a heart attack have normal LDL. Half have high LDL. Half have high cholesterol. Half have normal. It's not predictive. But triglyceride HDL ratio. If your triglycerides and HDL are 2 to 1, that's predictive for not a future heart attack. So if she's trying to focus on LDLs high, you can say, well, what's my ratio of triglyceride to HDL? 2 to 1. So that would be like triglyceride of 100, HDL of 50. That'd be 2 to 1. That is absolutely in the literature to show that's protective, especially for a woman. So that would be should be way more the focus of the doctor's attention. I barely even look at LDL in total. I mean, I only do because a patient's asking me about it. I would go right to the HDL triglyceride ratio. That's it. Or you could ask her, hey, could you check my LDL particle pattern or particle size? That's the A versus the B, the big fluffy versus the BB. You could ask for that. Most doctors don't know what that is. It's on our standard panel. I'm not here to sell our program and our panel, but in that wellness program, which we'll have brochures here, you can order that panel. If you have a Quest lab anywhere near you, you can order that panel on our website. You go to your Quest and you get it drawn, and then you get a 1-hour consult with our navigator. Included in that, it's $300 for that blood panel. But you get a 1-hour consult, and then wellness navigator, our health coach, she'll go through line by line. It's not just the cholesterol. There's a lot of blood work. And we're looking for lit fuses, markers of inflammation that carburetor's not working good. And that's one of them. We look at we look A or B. And a lot of standard Americans come in, they're B. After 3 months to 6 months, they repeat their lab, they flipped it to an A. They went from small, dense BB to big, fluffy. But you could ask her, she would draw it or order it if she's somewhat open. Yes, ma'am. Yes. I prefer do it with food because those are food-based supplements. Number one, you should try to get it all from food. And where your diet's deficient, then you'll be deficient. So get your diet better or supplement where you're deficient. And those 4 in particular, we call the core 4, tend to be the ones, even if you're trying to eat really good, our food's just deficient. But I prefer to do supplements with food. You'll digest it and absorb it better. It's fine. But I'd still be doing food with your caffeine. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we do. It's called the Healing Diet List. We have a pantry swap list. Swap this out for this for this, but it's all on the wellness program on the website. Yes, ma'am. They're both reported, usually in every single study, they'll both be reported, but sometimes not, just relative risk sometimes. I'll find the osteoporosis one at lunch because that's the best example. I'll show you the math that they do. But basically they subtract and divide and then subtract from 100%, and it's just some statistical math equations they do. But it's in the study. But guaranteed, every thing you see in any headline, it'll be the relative risk. It won't be absolute risk. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to let somebody know here that we have started a Brett Becker's co-op. It's starting
Awesome.
from, if you go on, it's Dublin. And we actually start ordering on April 1st to get wheat berries, meals, olive oils.
So here's the website she's talking about, Bread Beckers. You probably can't read that, but it's just like it sounds, Bread Beckers, BECKERS.com. This Sue Becker is the lady's name. I've interviewed her, I think, 3 times, but so you can go listen to those interviews on our website. But this is, or go to her website. She has a bunch of interviews there too. She has her own podcast. But her wheat and the bread machines, the mills, I mean, she just has it all. But you can do if you order straight from her website individually, I mean, a 5-pound bucket of wheat, the shipping on it is probably as much more than the wheat is. So the co-op, you get on there, order for the Dublin co-op, and it'll ship quarterly on an 18-wheeler. Will come and dump it all, and you go there that day and you pick it up. It's way better shipping-wise. And, I mean, wheat berries are pretty reasonable too. But, yes, ma'am.
So are you saying that if we do the pantry swap, our inflammation will come down and our attention deficit
Yep.
children will benefit?
That's what I'm saying. Yep. There's a great book called Gut and Psychology Syndrome, and by Dr. Natasha McBride, and I interviewed her too. But there it is right there, a yellow one. And it is specifically, about ADD, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, all those you see on the cover. But that whole book, it's about get real food into the gut to get the microbes in the gut, the probiotics in the gut to flourish.
And also, what about celiac and gluten intolerance?
Yep, celiac was the very...
Will they be able to then eat what you make without
Yep.
and consequences with their intestinal?
I've lost track of the number of testimonies that come in via email or just our patients. I've been gluten-free for 20 years. I started eating fresh milled and have no problem at all. There's 94 different strains of gut bacteria that should be in the gut, and that's what this book talks about, getting your gut bacteria to come back. But 94 strains that break down gluten. So probably gluten-sensitive folks, they're missing those.
You were successful with your gluten-free diet with the basic ingredients that are available to you, like the Better Batter or the King Arthur gluten-free flours. Those were beneficial to you?
There's good, better, and best. So if gluten irritates you, yeah, going gluten-free is better. But there's a reason the gluten's irritating you. Usually it's related to no stomach acid and not a good gut flora diversity. So a lot of our patients are able to reverse that and then eat fresh milled. Yep. Yes, sir.
Just one question. You talked about the heart this morning, diabetes this afternoon, and the mitochondria in both of them. Is it due to our insulin resistance for both of those as we age and our inability for our mitochondria? Is there a correlation between the two at the same time?
Yep. So age, I don't like to blame things on age by itself, but what age means is you've just too long of a time of being a standard American. So ancestrally, people can be 80, 90, even 110, 112 with zero insulin resistance because they were living and eating in a beneficial way. All right, guys, I think we're going to well, Pastor Ed will tell you all the stuff you need to know.
All right, y'all let Dr. Ben know that we appreciate this morning. Why don't we go ahead and stand, since we know sitting is so bad for us, and turn to your neighbor and try this on for size. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Just try it. Just tell it to somebody. We heard it never gets said. And Doug and Kevin have this brochure. We want to be sure and put it in your hands. If you guys will go ahead and start passing those out. This is the wellness. I want to call it the wellness deck. It's the platform. It's the wellness platform, and you can use that QR code there on the back and have access to some of the things he was saying. Asher, if you'll take Dr. Edwards to where he needs to be, and let's pray it out, and let's be back here at 1 o'clock. You know, Dr. Jordan Peterson, in his second book, talked about how that most people in a study would take care of their pets better than themselves. And it was because they didn't see the value. And I just want to compliment you for being here and say, you matter. Let's continue this journey. But also that education piece that he was talking about, when my wife sat across from a physician's assistant, the disdain she received because she said, I'm not going to take a statin. It was unbelievable. I thought I've not seen a grown woman talk down to another grown woman quite. You would have thought she was an uneducated fool the way this physician's assistant spoke to her. And so we must advocate for ourselves, and we must influence those that we love and care about. Father, we thank you for this morning. We pray, Lord, you keep us safe and help us to make some good nutritional choices right now, and bring us back here, Lord, at 1 so that we can be encouraged and educated into what we need and how we need to go forward to serve you with the purpose that you've placed on each of our lives. We thank you, Father, for this. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. We'll see you in approximately an hour.